Hi, I'm Jim McCann, founder of 1-800-Flowers. We created this podcast to share the wonderful people we get to interact with, we get to meet, we get to know, and most importantly, get to learn from. So I invite you to join us on this journey here on the Celebrations Chatter podcast. Anthony, when I think of you, we were chatting in our office here earlier about a project I'm working on. During COVID, I came to know and befriend a terrific man named Dr. George Everly.
Okay.
Dr. Everly is at Johns Hopkins at the Bloomberg School of Public Health, psychologist, an expert on all things related to stress and reaction to war and natural disasters, PTSD, et cetera. And we're working on some projects together. And one thing a project we're working on together right now is all around resiliency. And I said to him, and I said to Lisa here on my team while we were working on that project, I said, when I think of resiliency, I think of two people. One was a fellow I got friendly with and was a hero of mine. His name was Wayne Huizenga. And Wayne Huizenga was one of the great entrepreneurs of our time, who I'm sure you remember. He created 5 different Fortune 500 companies, and I don't know that anyone else has ever done that or come close. But in a conversation we had many years ago, he said to me, Jim, you and I make a lot of mistakes. We probably make quite a few more mistakes than other people we know. But the difference between entrepreneurs and everyone else is entrepreneurs pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and they recover quickly. And so on the topic of resiliency, the second name that comes to mind is Anthony Scaramucci.
Well, it's a big compliment, man. You know,
Well,
Wayne Huizenga was an amazing guy. I used to fly in his plane back and forth to the Super Bowl with Jack Schneider. Remember Jack?
Absolutely. I just was inquiring about Jack the other day. But for full disclosure, for the folks who will be listening to this, you're a friend of mine. You're a neighbor of mine. You and I have been partners. You were my son's boss for a decade or so. So we are connected in many ways. And for that, I'm proud.
Well,
and
first of all, no one could be Matthew's boss. You weren't his boss. Mary Lou wasn't his boss. We're referring to Jim's son. I wasn't his boss, but he's a great man. And I'm thrilled that I have such a great relationship with you. And we're connected through Long Island, I think, as well. I think this is a very special place. People that really understand Long Island. It's just a special place. There's a great culture out here. Culture for risk-taking, culture for being yourself and being comfortable in your own skin. I think that's if people say to me, well, what's it like to live on Long Island? Well, I don't know. I sort of feel like people are comfortable in their own skin. Billy Joel. You may or may not like Sean Hannity or Bill O'Reilly, but they're comfortable in their own skin. Jim McCann, myself, I can name other people that are reasonably well known on Long Island.
Well, that reminds me, Anthony, of something you've said to me many times, and I think about the wisdom of it, which is because I'm from the outer boroughs, Queens, and spent the majority of my adult life on Long Island. You grew up in Port Washington, right nearby where we live now. But you often say to me, we get it. Manhattan is a different place. It's a magical place. We call it the city. It's one of 5 boroughs, but it is the heart and soul of the community, the country, and the world. But it's a different stage. And you often say,
totally,
we get it.
We get it. Yeah. But what is the underlying thing is that there's joy in life through the appreciation of the process. If you're in a flower shop in Queens and you're manifesting a global brand, how are we going to do that? And so the answer is you just do it. And if it works out, that's awesome. And if it doesn't work out, the process of doing it is where the excitement is. You know, it is the journey. If we get to the right destination, great. If you don't, you start another journey. You know, I've had 3 or 4 great things happen to me. I've had a couple of mishaps and misfirings, but the whole thing has been great. You know, I was at the Harvard Law School yesterday. I graduated from there in 1989. And now that I mention that, people get pissed off and say, oh, now you're telling me how smart you are. No, people ask me where I go to law school, but I was there speaking to the kids. And what I said to the kids, you did well in the first third of your life. That's why you're here at Harvard Law School. The question is, what are you going to do in the next 2/3 of your life? Are you going to be the non-risk taker? Are you going to go to the consultancy? Are you going to go to the investment bank, the large corporation? Or are you going to be the non-risk taker because you went to Harvard and you'll have too much self-consciousness if you stumble or fail publicly? Or are you going to be the risk taker? Are you going to build 1-800-Flowers? Are you going to buy Harry and David? Are you going to grow a private enterprise that has some of the world's great businesses like Worth Magazine and Technonomy and all these different things? What are you going to do? How are you going to live your life? And oh, by the way, are you the person that's going to be at the cocktail party with your finger in the air? So you're holding the glass like this, your fingers in the air, and you're telling people how great you are, or are you just enjoying the flow of your life? Okay, that's the question that you have to ask yourself. So I had an uncle who was a World War II vet. They closed down Port Washington when he died. He died at 94. He was Ghost Motorcycle in Port Washington. His name was Sal DeFeo. He didn't go to college, but he was as smart as anybody that I met at any of the fancy pants schools that I went to. And he had a motorcycle shop in town. And he used to tell us as kids, fear nobody, take no bullshit from nobody, and enjoy yourself, right? And so there was one day I'm sitting in the shop. It was 883-5300 was the main line. I answered the phone. Hello, Ghost Motorcycle. How could I help you? And this guy says to me, well, there's a Ducati there. It's a 1978 Ducati. And it said, call for the price. And so I turned to my uncle. I said, Sal, I said, what's the price on the Ducati? He says, ask the guy if he wants the ballpark price. I said, sir, do you want the ballpark price? He says, yeah, the ballpark price. He said, what's the ballpark price? Says it's 3,000. I said, sir, it's 3,000. But my uncle said, bring cash. Oh, 3,000. That's like a $5,000 bike. I'll be right there. Okay. So now the guy shows up. Okay. Well, the motorcycle shop was right next to the Main Street school, and there was a ballpark. And so the guy walks in, Jim, and he says, I'm here for the bike. I got the $3,000. And my uncle says, oh, you call for the ballpark price? And he said, yeah, I call for the ballpark price. So he went to his desk in the front of the shop and he wrote down on a napkin $3,000. And then he crumbled up the napkin. He walked outside. He said, you see the ballpark over there? See the ballpark? And he threw the napkin into the ballpark. He goes, that's the price in the ballpark. Okay. He goes, it's $5,600 here in the ship. The guy went crazy. Okay. And I said, Sal, are you out of your mind? He said, hey, man, he says, first of all, he sold the bike for $5,600. The guy got out of there. We sold him a helmet, the whole thing. And my uncle said to me, I was never going to get him into the shop if I told him the straight up price. But once he was here with the money, and he already
saw the bike.
Yeah, and he already had his brain committed on the bike. You know what I mean? The
Yep.
brain was already fixed on the bike, and the piece of paper was in the ballpark. Okay. You see, you're laughing because that's how we grew up, Jim.
Yep.
That's how we grew up. Okay. There was another scene in the shop where we had a diehard battery. Okay. And if you upset us, and let's say you had to go to the bathroom. So McCann walks in and he's giving us a hard time. He said, okay, where's the bathroom? I said, it's behind the parts counter to the left. You'd go into the bathroom. We had a diehard battery from Sears and 2 jumper cables. We'd hook the jumper cables to the doorknob. So now the guy is in the bathroom. He's trying to get out of the Jesus Christ, I think the doorknob's electrocuted. There's something going on here. I said, I think the only way out is through the window. You gotta climb out the window. I think there's something wrong with the doorknob. All right. That's Long Island. Okay. That's how we grew up, you know? And so, you don't take yourself that seriously, oh, yes, I'm working on serious things and I love
But
my
that,
clients.
that's the point I was getting to.
Right.
Your attitude, and there are certain people I go to for attitude, and you're one of them.
Oh, I
And
appreciate that.
but let me ask you this. Why I go to you for attitude? Because you say, look, it's not that serious. Can't take this too serious. This is all a game. You and I get it. We realize it is a game and we're playing it and we don't take this too seriously. But what happens to Anthony when you're genuinely down? Who do you
Right.
go to?
It's a good question.
How do you hit the
Look,
restart button on
It's a-
attitude?
It's a very good question, and I'm going to address that in a second. But I want to say this to you. It's a game, but you and I know that living in America, growing up the way we did, or someone listening to this podcast, if you're listening to the podcast, you have the technology available to yourself to listen to the podcast, you've won the game. And the minute you understand that you're so blessed to just be here and with these paved roads and the access to the technology, whatever it may be, you can create and you can be somebody. But I have been down a few times. I'm not perfect. When I got fired from the White House.
Oh, did you get fired from the White House?
Oh man, and we're still talking about it 6-7 years later, but I got this. I was blown into Pennsylvania Avenue. Okay, Bill Maher said I was Tony Soprano on the Potomac. Steve Colbert, I think he said that I was Jim Tan Lounge. I was a Jersey Shore cast member. I mean, they were firing in the Italian stereotypes.
Other people, Anthony, would have been crushed by that. I could see other people being suicidal over that. But you know how to hit the reset button and say, wait a minute, I can turn this into lemonade.
Well, I want to talk about that though, because I was very down. Okay. I made a mistake. I said something to a reporter I trusted. If you put that on CNN, I'm going to get fired. I said, by the way, our families know each other from Long Island for 60 years. Why would you do that to me? You put it on CNN, I got fired. And I'm very good friends with General Kelly. I never blamed him. I never blamed Donald Trump. I blame myself for the firing. I made a mistake. It deserved to be fired, got fired. But I was down. And it was a very bad period of time for me. And my wife and I were fighting. And my wife, Deirdre, and she filed for a divorce on me. Okay. So this is no fooling around. She's half Italian, half German. These people will kill you in hot and cold weather, Jim, if they're half Italian, half German, right? So she's trying to kill me. But the good news is she loved me. And so the divorce was like a warning shot, right? So now I'm fired from the White House. I've been filed for divorce.
You had a baby on the way, I think.
Baby on the way. Baby was just given birth to. He's 6 now. God bless him. James, he looks terrific. He's awesome. We patched up our marriage, but now I got to deal with this existential crisis going on with this very high profile firing. And I'll tell you this quick story. I'm walking on the outdoor promenade in Santa Monica, like on 3rd or 4th Street. Maybe you've been down there, beautiful outdoor shopping mall. My son puts his arm around me. He's 25. And he says to me, hey, Dad, are you going to be okay? And I said, AJ, what do you mean? He says, well, I mean, this is like a disaster. I mean, this is like as bad of a public excoriation and shaming and as it could possibly be and blah, blah, blah. And it was right there. I looked at him and I said, AJ, not only am I going to be okay, watch what I do with this, but I'm not going to bullshit BS you. I'm down. I mean, I made a mistake. I got blown out of a situation. And by the way, that situation, getting blown out of it in hindsight, it probably saved my career and probably saved my marriage. That's how things are, by the way. There's always a silver lining in things. But I was down. And so you're asking me, how do you get yourself back up? For me, it is my family. It may be something different for somebody else, but for me, it's like, what? I am.
But you're estranged from Deirdre at the time. Your relationship is strained. When you say family, define family.
Define family. That would be my mom and dad. I have 5 children. That would be Deirdre, even though we're estranged, but now it's my family. How am I going to comport myself? How am I going to handle myself so that my kids can have a good role model? And there's something I love about you, which I'll share with your listeners. You're a great role model. and you're a great role model, not because you're perfect, but because you're imperfect. Because I believe, and Hazegna has this, you don't want to be perfect to your kids. I could tell my kids the following narrative. You ready? Blue collar family. Dad was a crane operator on West Shore Road, Tufts, Harvard Law School, 2 successful businesses, financial.
Two stints at Goldman Sachs.
2 stints at Goldman Sachs, financially independent. I could give this whole BS story, and then you wouldn't see the jagged edge oscillations. I'm sure, and I read one of your books a while back, that you had a couple of near-death experiences business experiences as you were starting 1-800 Flowers and growing it. Michael Dell has had them, Bill Gates has had them, Jeff Bezos has had them. Anybody that goes into entrepreneurship has these ups and downs. And it is so important to show your kids the imperfections, because to be a good role model, you got to expose yourself. And so, my oldest son is at Stanford, graduate from Stanford Business School. My daughter is now, she's going to be the 25th Christine. Probably sound like I'm bragging, but I'm just going to talk very candidly to you.
Oh, and well, you should.
She has been singing since 3 years old. She's 27. She has been the soprano accompaniment for Andrea Bocelli. He recommended her to Andrew Lloyd Webber. Phantom closed here in New York this past month, but it's opening in Europe. And on the European tour, my daughter is going to play the lead. She's going to be Christine in Phantom of the Opera.
How terrific is that?
Wow. How many setbacks did Amelia have to face? How many no's did she have to face? How many rejections? How many agents told her, you're just not good enough? Your singing voice isn't right for this. And so that happens in life. And so, I want to be a role model for them where they can see me get my face blasted off, but I can still get back up and get in the game. Okay, because that'll teach them that, hey, it's okay. And when I was at the law school yesterday, I said to the kids, take the risks. What does Mel Brooks say? Okay, Mel Brooks is 95 now, Jim. He just wrote a great autobiography about himself. The title is so amusing. All About Me. It's All About Me, by Mel Brooks. What does he say in the book? He says, hey, man, relax. None of us are getting out of here alive. Okay, relax.
Yep.
Okay, relax into life. Try to enjoy the process of life. Okay, we all know how it's going to end. So let's relax and enjoy it. And so when you ask me about how do I get myself back up, I think of my kids.
Yep.
I think of my family. And I take risk. I sold 30% of my business to Sam Bankman-Fried. He turned out to be a fraud. I didn't realize it at the time. I got excoriated for that. I'm getting lit up in the papers for that. Okay. But I thought it was a good idea. And I took the risk.
Well, that's the difference between people who are willing to go on stage and those who don't. Your daughter went on stage literally and figuratively.
Yes.
And there's lots of people who will never feel that rejection that she felt. And they're very comfortable in that, but they'll never feel the sound of the applause that she'll get for being for an achiever.
100%.
You can choose to play in the game or not.
100%. You have to be able to feel the pain of getting your face smashed while you're ascending if you really want to achieve your dreams. And so I can't tell you the moments where she had called me in despair. I got cut. I was in the final round for Les Mis. I was in London for the final round of Harry Potter. I got cut. Not good enough. I said, well, you probably are good enough. You're just not the right person at the right time. You got to stay in there, And so you understand that better than anybody. And this is why you've been so successful, but also you have a great sense of humor. The thing I love about you, among your many qualities, is how to turn it, something's going bad. You have gallows humor, like when Steve Colbert said to me live, how long did you think you were going to last in the White House? I said, longer than a carton of milk in the refrigerator. I think I was going to get blown out before the milk spoiled. The point being is that
other people
have to do that.
This is a lesson that I point to with my kids, other young people I get to work with around the office. Anthony Scaramucci turned that lemon into lemonade. And it didn't happen overnight. But so I'm wondering, when you were a kid working at Ghost Motorcycle, when you think of how people would react, because when you say your family, I bet you're thinking of a conversation you have with Uncle Sal, who's gone.
Sure.
But
Sure.
you still have conversation with him because
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
made a big impression on your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And my dad, listen, my dad, different guy, wasn't an entrepreneur. He's still with us. God bless him. He's 88. He was more of he grew up in a very impoverished area of northeastern Pennsylvania. His dad was a coal miner. He responded to an advertisement to move out to Long Island. Don't go into the ground and mine coal, come out to Long Island and mine sand. And so you remember McCormick Sand and Stone, and
Sure.
so that's where he started. He started as a laborer, then he developed the skill to operate the crane. And he was more of a nervous guy because of how impoverished they were as kids. And so there was always some level of financial anxiety in the house. But my father—
And how
has
good
said
does
to
it make
me—
you feel that he doesn't have to have that anxiety anymore?
Oh yeah, no,
Because
thank God I take care of everything for them, and it's a pleasure for me to do that. But the thing I was going to say to you, there were three things he said to me, all of which I've taken with me my whole life. Number one, he said to me, if you can't afford the price of the ticket, don't go to the movies. Okay. And this is an old fashioned saying, meaning live within your means.
within your means.
Yeah. I mean, I could throw up a bigger house. I could have this, but no problem. I'm living within my means. Gives me a lot of cushion and flexibility. Number two, pay your bills, pay them on time. I can remember a time he was coming out of the Williams Chinese Laundry, which is on Main Street in Port Washington. And he had a couple of shirts, dress shirts, even though he was a laborer, he had some dress shirts to go out once in a while. And there was a parking ticket we were right in front of Brothers All. You remember the Brothers All supermarket probably. And,
Yep.
and there was a parking ticket on the car. And my father said, oh, and he said, we got to go up to the post office. I said, we're going to the post office. Okay. Why are we doing that? Well, I got to pay the parking ticket. I'm like, well, Dad, why don't you just write a check and send it? No. I got to pay it right now. That was my old man. So pay your bills and keep your nose clean. And the third thing he did, which I will never forget, is in April of 1982, which is 41 years ago now, I got accepted to Tufts University. And I had a choice between going to one of the SUNY schools, Jim, or that private college. And I'll give you the math. Okay, the SUNY school was $3,500. The private school was $24,000. Okay, it's 70 today or whatever it was, but we're talking about 41 years ago. And my guidance counselor at this time, Mr. Zanetti, said to me, you really should
Paul
go.
Washington High School, Schreier High School.
Schreiber High School. He said, you got to go to the private school. I said, I don't think we have the money. He says, no, listen to me. You got to go to the private school. You'll figure it out. You're a hustler. I was working at Key Food. I was working at Ghost. I had a paper route. He goes, you'll figure out a way to get the money. And my dad, I will never forget this the rest of my life. It was February of 1982. He handed me a check for $10,000. And I said to him, okay, Dad, what is this? And he said, well, I just cashed in my union life insurance policy. I said, okay. He goes, yeah, that's the cash value of my life insurance policy. And I can't really help you with the school, but here's the money to help you get started at Tufts. I was a Long Island Guido. Okay. I was driving around in a Camaro. I had gold chains on. I had the red, the red pepper, the Malocchio thing. I had the hair blown back like Tony Manero in Saturday Night Fever. Okay. I was chasing every Irish and Italian girl in a 25-mile radius of my home. Okay. And I was a little bit of a jackass. When he handed me that check, I looked at him. I said, oh my God, this is so important to my dad. This is so important that I don't screw this up. I had this epiphany, Jim. I'm going to go to Tufts. I'm going to work my ass off. I'm going to get super good grades at Tufts so that I can send a message to my parents that I'm so grateful that they're helping me try to do this. Do you see what I mean? So it wasn't just Sal. It was my father. My mother's still with us. You see my mom probably in
All the
town.
time.
My mother also, these were very smart people who were just uneducated. They didn't have the opportunity. I remember being at Harvard once, and some guy was like, waxing and blah, blah. I looked at him and said, look, I know you're smart, but you know what? There are sheetrock installers in Port Washington that are as smart as you, okay? But the problem is their father was a sheetrock installer. And so they're installing sheetrock, but trust me, they're just as smart as you. They just had a vector of opportunity that went this way as opposed to that way. And when you understand that, that's how you become so
It's my
grateful.
sister's birthday.
Go to 1-800-Flowers.com.
They have tons of great birthday gifts. Wow.
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 Happy birthday, baby.
Wow.
Yeah, me. I got to contain myself.
1-800-Flowers.
Celebrate the people you love.
Anthony Scaramucci's getting it.
Right?
When
Am
you
I
say
wrong?
we get it, that's
Right.
getting it.
Get it. We get it. Come on. It's a dream. We talking about my daughter, Fred Wilpon, another mutual friend of yours and mine. He put my daughter on the field at
This thing.
at Shea Stadium. She was 12 years old, and he put her on the field for the 7th inning to sing "God Bless America" at the age of 12 in front of 53,000 people. And my daughter,
How
really
much do you
says,
think that day set the hook in terms of her wanting to pursue that as a
well,
career?
not only that, she was so nervous. Okay, she was so nervous, and she proved to herself she could do it. And she's never sung in front of that many people in live. I mean, not television, movies, etc. But I'm talking about 53,000 people in a stadium. She sang at Citi Field a few times. It's only 40,000 people, still a lot of people, but that set in her brain that she could do it. It set in her brain that she had the ability to overcome stage fright. And again, Jim, first time you were on TV, let me ask you a question if you don't mind. Were you nervous the first time you were ever on TV?
Of course.
Yeah.
If you're not, and by the way, that's part of the payoff, because it's a pendulum. If you don't get nervous, you're not going to feel the juice afterwards.
100%. 100%. So I was nervous the first time on TV, and she was nervous at Citi Field. But then you're able to prove to yourself that you can do it, and then you can practice it and get better at it, and so on and so forth. So it's just it's just putting yourself in that flow, making yourself uncomfortable. You've got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable if you want to be an entrepreneur, a performer, a personality. You got to be uncomfortable. This is a video cast, right?
Yep.
All right. So let's see if I can show this and people will see this. Hold on. So this is my 2022. This is a pictorial demonstration of my year. Okay, you ready? Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, that's my butt on fire running out of a house on the reality show. But that's my whole 2000. I mean, I got killed in the stock market. I got killed in my cryptocurrency portfolio. And there I am in June of last year. A Navy SEAL set me on fire, and he was
And I
screaming.
remember seeing you run by my house with a backpack on. I
Right.
figured, oh my God, he's taken to robbing houses in the neighborhood and he's being chased by the police.
Well, trust me, if I was robbing houses in the neighborhood, I'd be coming to your house. Okay. 'Cause I know you got the goodies in there, Jim. But at any event, I mean, look, that's uncomfortable. Jumping out of a helicopter is uncomfortable. Walking a
Well, hold it,
tightrope.
hold it. Agreeing to do the show where they tell you we're going to have the British Special Forces and Navy SEALs take you out into the Jordanian desert, and we're going to do some crazy stuff to you. You accepting that, knowing you're going to put yourself, the first scary decision is saying, yeah, I'll do this, which you did. And then you deal with all the crazy situations within that crazy decision that you had to confront. And I remember running into you at the beach where you were telling us you were just back. Right. And you were telling us all the crazy things that went on, and you were animated, and you were like, I can't believe I did this shit.
No, it was crazy, and by the way, I know you couldn't make the home opener because we moved it, but I had Mike Piazza, the Hall of Fame catcher, was my bunkmate on that show. And so he came to the home opener with us, and he was holding court, and he was telling people how scared him and I we were like out of our mind scared at certain things, you know.
I
And it was,
can't imagine you wouldn't be.
oh my God. And then it was one night where I
How
totally
about,
forgot.
I
it 'cause
remember you going backwards out of a helicopter
yeah,
into the sea head
Yeah.
first with your
Yeah.
arms clasped in front of you.
yeah, 100%. That's 100%. And one woman hurt herself because she landed improperly. And so you literally had to land in a direct hit to the water. And, you know, I'm 59, Mike's 53. So we were the oldest guys out there running the track, you know, but again, putting yourself into a uncomfortable situation. So what came out of that for me? Well, I obviously have got that notch of experience under my belt, but I've become so close to Michael and so close to Danny Amendola and the NBA All-Star center, Dwight Howard. You know, we're socializing. I mean, we're bonded now.
You've learned a gift, and that is the ability to poke fun at yourself. You love poking fun at yourself.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't bother me because what are we gonna do, right? But you'll enjoy the story. It's 2015. I am on the board of the Business Executives for National Security. They call me, they say, listen, we're going to do a troop support mission in Afghanistan. Do you want to come with us? I said, yes, I do. I had gone to Iraq with them in 2011. So yes, I do. My wife says to me, you know, those dates are at the beginning of the World Series. Suppose the Mets are in the World Series. Now, you know, I'm a Met fan for 50 years, and I'm also one of these sad sack Met fans. So I turned to my wife. I said, NFW that the Mets are going to make the World Series. Okay. So I booked myself the trip to Afghanistan, and guess what happens? The Mets make the World Series, right? So there's two funny stories there. Number one, I'm asking the general if I could watch the game at 4 a.m. in Kandahar. He says, no problem. I walk in with my Met hat on, and all these kids are from the Midwest. They all got their Kansas City Royals hats on, and they're booing me. Okay. And of course, the Mets got schmeisted the first two games, right? And this 25-year-old Army captain, he says to me, so if the siren goes off, I said, the siren? He says, yes, if the siren goes off, you got to start running. You got 7 minutes to get into the bomb shelter. That means they're shooting projectiles into the base. I said, wait, they're shooting projectiles into the base? He goes, yeah, where do you think you are? I said, okay. So now I'm like white as a ghost. I decide to go to sleep fully clothed, Jim. Okay. I got my shoes right next to me. I'm asleep fully clothed. I'm looking up at the, right. And I hear this beeping sound in my beep, beep. Holy shit. I put my shoes on. I open the door. I'm running down the hall. Okay. I get outside and there's like an Army sentinel, like a guard out there. He says, what are you doing, sir? I said, what am I doing? I said, where's the bomb shelter? He said, why are you going into the bomb shelter? I said, there's a siren going off in my room. And they told me I had to start heading for the bomb shelter. He said, sir, if there was a siren going off in your room, the whole base would be, you know, he goes, let me see what the hell's going on. He comes into the room. It was the smoke detector, Jim. The battery was dead in the smoke detector. Okay. I mean, so I like telling the story to people because there I am as a civilian being protected by the U.S. Army in a general's quarters. And I was scared out of my mind. Imagine being an 18-year-old, a 19-year-old wearing an American uniform on the front line to get an appreciation for what these people go through. You know, I just try to put everything into context, try to put everything into the frame, into the prism that it should be in, you know, and I think that is also very therapeutic.
Let's turn to current affairs.
Yeah.
Here we are, 2023, and you and I are sitting here very comfortable, and there's a war going on in Europe. Have any of the wars that we've been involved in since you and I are alive, which would be starting with Vietnam, have any of them made sense?
Okay, so it's a weird,
We got the benefit of hindsight.
I'm going to give you a weird answer. Okay, since we have this a video cast as well, I'm going to hold this book up. Okay, so not many Americans will remember him. And this book just came out. Frank wrote it, Frank Castigliola. George Kennan was one of the most brilliant diplomats in post-World War II era. He was a deputy ambassador. He worked with Admiral Harriman in Moscow, and he wrote a very famous cable to Harry Truman about the Soviet Union. And he signed it with an X, and they sent a, I don't know, 5 or 10,000 word cable to the White House from Moscow. And he said that this is a sinister and persistent empire, and Stalin wants to communize all of Europe, a result of which we better come up with a policy of containment to prevent them from doing that. It was called the containment policy.
Yep.
And so what happened was we had the Truman Doctrine, we had the Marshall Plan. All of this stuff came out of the containment policy, and this was an interesting time in America because there was a bipartisan commitment to this. And so we had Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, et cetera, right up through Reagan in a bipartisan way, all accepting this foreign policy. And a result of which it caused us to do some things that were terrible in hindsight, but they were in line with the policy, okay? One of them was the North Vietnamese, South Vietnamese War. We were worried about a domino effect of communism, so we put our troops there to see if we could stave it off. One of them was the Korean War in the 50s, and as you know, that war is technically still going on. We have an armistice, but we don't have a peace declaration between those two sides. And so the answer is Korea was successful because look at the prosperity in South Korea.
Yep.
Vietnam was very unsuccessful. The Bay of Pigs was unsuccessful. You could say that Grenada was successful. Okay, that was probably an overwhelming amount of force, but I can take you through each thing and each misstep. And then we get to the Gulf War, the first Gulf War. And the Gulf War was really still generally misunderstood by the American public. And so who started that war? Well, the American public thinks that Saddam Hussein started that war, but it was actually the Kuwaitis started that war. So what happened was there's a border dispute in every one of these countries, and the Kuwaitis were diagonally drilling into an oil field that was across the border into Iraq. So the well was over here and the rig was over here, but they were drilling over there to tap that oil field. Mm-hmm. And Saddam Hussein, who had a good relationship with Rumsfeld and Reagan, and thought he had a good relationship with Baker and Bush, he called to the White House and to the State Department, and he said, they're drilling on my land. I'm pissed off about it. What would you like me to do? Well, there's a woman that will remain nameless. She was at the State Department at the time, and she said, well, we would like you to do whatever you think you need to do to get them to stop drilling. He took that as a sign to invade the country. When he started escalating to invade the country, it got to Baker and Bush, and they called him and said, you can't do that. And then he said, well, you don't understand. I live in a very tough neighborhood. Now that I flex my muscles, if I back down, it's going to be very, very bad for me. Okay, so I'm really trying to apply context here. So that war was actually successful. Okay, why was that successful? We pushed him back over his border. We restored the sovereignty of Kuwait, and we left him alone. And people say, well, why the hell did we leave him alone? Why don't we just march on Baghdad? Well, I just gave you the backstory why we didn't do that. We then set up a no-fly zone. President Clinton was a very smart guy, and he listened to George Bush on certain things. And so the Iraq situation was generally contained, okay? But then we got into stupid zone, and you have to forgive me for this because I do like George W. Bush, but I think history is not going to treat him well on a lot of things. Number one, we were running a budget surplus going into the Bush administration, $240 billion budget surplus in the year 2000. Mr. Bush wanted a tax cut. He had that tax cut in March of 2001. When we had the terrorist attack, and we can talk about the mistakes we made, but we had the terrorist attack. It was very obvious we were going to react to it and go to war. We went to war in October. this is the first time in U.S. history that we went to war without a tax increase. And so I just want to explain that to people. That's a disaster because you're spending a tremendous amount of money on the war and you just put in a tax cut. He could have restored the Clinton tax rates and everyone would have been fine with that due to their patriotism, but he didn't. And he started to blow a hole in our deficit. And so you can go back to those decisions and you can see the exponential growth in our deficit. And so that war that he perpetrated in Afghanistan was a correct war, but the one in Iraq, his father didn't want to do it. His dad's old, and I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. It will come to me. I can see his face. It was Scowcroft.
Yep.
Okay, so Scowcroft did
General
not.
Scowcroft.
Right, exactly. He did not want to do it. Him and George Bush Sr. wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, said no problem with Afghanistan, but you can't go into Iraq because Iraq, whether you like him or not, is fairly stable. And the region is fairly stable, between Iraq and Iran. Don't destabilize the region. But the neocons would not listen to them. Okay. And so we prosecuted these wars to nowhere, endless trillions of dollars. I could tell you stories from Kandahar where the Bagram airport was built up and ramped up. And then we made a decision to tear it down. And then we made a decision with the surge to build it back up again. We probably spent $500 billion building the airport, taking the airport down and building it up again due to the fits and starts of political whims. So the short answer is not available. You have to go with the long answer. And so the long answer to your question is it did work in terms of containing communism, bringing down the Soviet Union. It didn't work in terms of the pain that it caused because some of these wars have been very unsuccessful for the U.S. We have another unsuccessful war going on right now that we're helping, which is the Ukrainian war. And you and I know that there's a threat that there will be a war in East Asia related to the Taiwan island, the island of Formosa, and the eventual acquisition of that island through force, likely by the Communist Party of China.
Let's do some quick hits here, Anthony. You're smart about a lot of things. You're connected in ways that most people can't imagine. And so you have a point of view on a lot of different things on a long range of topics, but you live your day job in the financial services community. So let me ask you, with your experience in financial services, what do you expect the rest of this calendar year looks like in terms of the economy?
So I think we're still in a Fed-centric environment. We've been in a Fed-centric environment from 2008. Probably the smartest investors that I know, like Steve Cohen or Dave Tepper, they have said consistently, believe the Fed. The Fed's telling you they're raising rates. Don't be tricked into it. Don't be conditioned to low rates. Believe the Fed. And I think the Fed is still indicating that they have more rate rises to come. I don't agree with it, by the way. I think it's a very bad Fed strategy, and it's going to probably lead us to a deeper recession than we needed to go in. And I think the irony is the inflation numbers have already peaked, and they would be well suited not to continue to raise rates. But I think we're in a Fed-centric environment. These rate hikes are going to persist probably through the summer. And then at which point we probably will get some kind of relief rally coming into 24. Remember, it's also a presidential election year, and you have an incumbent running, likely. It looks like Joe Biden is running. He's going to dump a tremendous amount of money into the economy, try to help the economy. So I like.
So we have the Fed will at least pause. You'll have all this spending going on from a
it'll be a good year. 2024 will be a good stock market. I think it would be a dangerous thing to get out of the market. I don't like market timing. Everybody's a long-term investor until they have short-term losses. Then they get all upset and they go crazy. It's just better to just be invested, look at the long-term, buy quality, and don't focus on the short-term machinations of the market. But there's an obscure thing that happened, and sort of like a butterfly effect, and that is the Fed missized the number of hospital beds in China and say, what the hell does that have to do with anything? So you had lockdowns in China that lasted way longer than we would have anticipated. And the Chinese authorities did that because they couldn't have the embarrassment of tens of millions of deaths in the country because they have a faulty healthcare system. We missized that, okay? And so they left the lockdowns in place longer. Some of the cynics will say that Xi did that to exert more control. Perhaps some of that is true, but I don't agree with that because that hurt his economy, Jim. I don't think he wanted to hurt his economy. I just don't think he wanted the embarrassment on the national stage of international stage of all those people dying. So we missized the reconnection of the supply chain, and that caused us to say that inflation was transitory. And so we should have started raising rates and cutting back in 21 more gradually. It would have been easier for people. But we're here now, and so we have to deal with it, you know?
So you see a couple of more rate increases?
I do. I don't agree with them, but I see there'll probably be another 2 or 3 25 basis point rate increases. I think that they're going to over raise rates actually. And I think they're going to probably have to start cutting in the first part of 24 again. But I don't think they need to because the supply chain's reconnecting. The inflation numbers are already coming down. You're a technologist. I'm a technologist. There's so much technology being onboarded into the economy that's going to reduce prices. It would be really stupid to keep us where we are right now, my opinion.
So we talked about technology. You brought that up. AI is going to have an outsized influence on our lives in the months and years ahead. We've
Yes.
seen the introduction of ChatGPT. It seems like we've been talking about it forever, and it's only been several months. So what impact do those technologies have on us, our the way we live, and the way we do business?
Well, I think they're seismic, but I think that they're not well documented yet. I don't think people fully understand the capabilities in terms of the research, the writing skills, the mathematical computation, the software developing and engineering.
To write code, sure.
Yeah, you know, it's everything. You know, somebody breaking my onions sent me what are Anthony Scaramucci's weaknesses, and ChatGPT had a long list of my weaknesses, okay, which I was horrified about. Someone sent me a poem, write a poem about Anthony Scaramucci. And I think in that case, I needed to send ChatGPT a 1-800 flowers bouquet because there was a lot of love coming from ChatGPT. So I think it's almost like ChatGPT was hitting on me with the poem. But it's a fascinating thing, you know, and you can put stuff in there, you know, like you were talking about resilience. You could ask ChatGPT, who are some of the big figures in resilience and what are the attributes of resilience and how many words do you want? Well, if you want 10,000 words, ChatGPT is going to write you this very eloquent 10,000 word book report, essay, book, whatever you want to call it, pamphlet on resilience, and you never touched it. And by the way, it'll be documented and footnoted so that you can't get accused of plagiarism because it's all, you know, precisely annotated. Yep. So yes, I think that this is revolutionary. I guess I would ask people not to be afraid of it. I would ask people to, you know, embrace it. And I would ask the government to think about, from an international standards point of view, what are the checks and balances that you need to not go into a tipping point of some kind of dystopia related to it. But then you got to ask yourself, what about our adversaries? What are they planning with artificial intelligence? And it would be a mistake for the United States not to be pressing forward with it. Whatever your sociological views of it are, we don't really have a choice. And so we have to be part of it.
Anthony, I started by telling you the work we're doing with Dr. George Everly on resiliency. And I was telling him about you and the respect I have for you and your ability to be resilient, your willingness to take risks. And that I told him, you're one of the people I go to in a world where friendships matter and fewer people are gifted to have friendships. I'm gifted to be a friend of yours.
Oh, I would say
And to be
vice
able to
versa.
talk to
You've been
to
great
talk
to
to
me.
you and catch what I always catch from you, which is attitude.
Well, I appreciate it, sir. You know, I love you to death. And, you can't get rid of me. I'm like toe fungus, Jim. So I'm going to be in your life forever. Okay.
That's
what
a
I mean?
good thing, Anthony.
Slightly annoying, but permanent. Okay. Just letting you know.
Last question, and we'll
Yeah.
end on this. Mets record at the end of this year.
That's a tough one. So I don't think I hate to say this because I'm a diehard fan. They're doing well right now, but they've got an older team. And I think they will not get to the 101 games that they got to last year. I'm going to say 96 probably.
96 gets them in the playoff.
Yeah, 96 gets them into the playoffs. Yeah, they'll be in the
Yep.
playoffs, but I don't think
Well,
they
we'll-
get to 100 games this year.
Well, we'll see you there, and I suggest you keep your arm loose because they're going to need some help out of the bullpen, and you better be ready, Anthony Scaramucci.
I'm going to be ready, and I'll be throwing lefty compared to some of the people I've seen.
Thanks, Anthony.
We put our heart into everything we do. We are farmers, bakers, florists, and makers who grow and create with a passion. Made with love at every step of the way. Because at the end of the day, we know you're sending more than a gift. 1-800-Flowers, share with love.
Well, I hope you enjoyed what you heard, and I know I'll be sharing it forward. I hope you get to as well. Let's keep the conversation going. Follow me along on Twitter at Jim 1-800-Flowers and on LinkedIn at Jim McCann. Hope to talk to you soon.